Hi, cool. Us, Hanshi Marc,
Yes.
uh, thank you for coming on the podcast. I know we've been a little bit delayed because my son was ill, so a few weeks delay, but I am overwhelmed and super happy that you are joining me today.
It's absolutely a pleasure. I understand the importance of podcasts and videocasts like this, particularly with the. I'm going to take my glasses off. It won't be pleasant, but I'm taking my glasses off. Particularly with the rise of kind of, particularly amongst young men, mental health problems. So it's absolutely no, you're actually blurred. So I'm putting my glasses back on. Now I can see you back again. So it's
That-
an absolute delight, and it's a genuine honor to be able to help and take part of this. I read your book, so I must be the fifth mark
mm,
because in your book you mentioned four marks, I think.
yeah, my wife is convinced that in Polish that only people called Marek, Mark. It's such a popular. I think it's over the world. Mark is one of the most popular names.
Yeah, I'm 66 now, so it wasn't that popular when I was younger.
Oh,
But nowadays I do see more kind of marks creeping in.
mm. So I think you been in a golden era of knockdown karate and modern karate. Reading through
Mhm.
your biography, you've been fortunate to be around that I consider the legends, the kind of offshot and creation of Oyama's Kyokushin. You went in Ashihara, you went with Joe Blooming in a Budokai. Can you take us about your history? We've been a champion as well in UK in Wadoryu. So can you take us through that rich history?
Okay, so I started in 1973, 74. In those days, you pretty much had to do what was geographically available to you. And I was only 14 at the time. I had no car to drive to a slightly bigger city. So the only system that was available to me was Wadoryu. And so my first sensei was Kevin Hamilton Stewart, who has recently retired for the English Karate Board. I still keep in contact with him. I phone him up once or twice a year. An incredible coach, but very much geared towards simple, hard techniques. You know, we did so many press ups. When I went there, due to the abuse and kind of emotional neglect from my father, um, I had gained weight. This is quite common for you to look for other sensory ways of dealing with stuff. So I gained weight, and I was a chubby kid. I was airing towards starting to get fat. So when I started training there, Kevin Hamilton Stewart was also a Londoner. So for me, my father being a Londoner, but now meeting a man who was very stable, suddenly I could kind of overlay onto him. I could start looking to him to becoming a positive male role model. So I started working really hard with him. I wanted to, within the dojo, I wanted to impress him, and I worked hard and was trying to be fearless in my fighting. But I was quite short. I'm still am quite short. I wish I was taller with more hair. But we don't always get what we want.
Very
Um,
true.
and that resulted in a couple of times being, I think, very lucky with the kumite, you know, being a little bit quicker, working hard. I, like a lot of young people, I became obsessional
Hmm.
about what I'm doing. Particularly young people are on the verge of having some kind of mental health problems that you're unaware of at the time. And given that, remember, this was the kind of 70s. So if you got a battering by your father, then my mother got a battering as well.
Mm.
Um, the social services didn't tend to get that involved. There was very much a case of, well, what did you do to deserve this?
Yeah.
As opposed to, yeah, you might have been cheeky, but you don't deserve to be battered. But you should have been a bit more,
Mm.
kind of, you know. And as a child, when you grow up in extraordinary violence, you become very aware of trigger points within human beings, and sometimes you can overlay these trigger points on perfectly normal kind of interactions, bodily
Hmm.
interactions. So anyway, I started with the martial arts. I worked really hard with that. I had been, you can probably see this picture here.
Hmm. Yep.
This guy here. Okay. So when I was at school, I was actually very quite lost. I had no positive male role models. My father, who was in the Navy at the time, so I grew up in a naval environment, and that in itself checked a lot of the violence that he could do towards my mother and then onto myself. My sister, interestingly, never got touched, never ever got touched. But we lived on naval estates, so a lot of the violence was checked by the simple fact of the structure of the military. That checked a lot of it. But when I was about 11, he decided the Navy was getting rid of a lot of its personnel. So he decided to put his money in a hotel. No idea. He never ran a hotel in his life. He was radar and electronics and a Navy diver. No idea why he decided to do that, but he did it. And of course, now he has drink, and the whole structure that kept him in place has now removed. So this is when the violence became really quite terrible, more towards my mother. And then as a young man, I would attempt to intervene, but I couldn't match him for strength. He was a Navy champion boxer. It wasn't like he was some kind of fat, cowardly man who just hit women and then ran away. He would fight in the bar. He would fight anybody, so I didn't really have a chance of kind of beating him. And so I was a little bit lost. Trust me, this story does come round to martial arts. And this Alan Owen here was my teacher. He was my chemistry teacher. And for some reason, he recognized something in me, maybe the way I was interacting, maybe the way I was. And then he reached out and started to work with me. One of the things he was into was martial arts, which he'd done in the 60s with Shotokan Karate with Kanasaki Inoida. And he'd gone on about how great martial arts was. I now think, I can't beat my dad at boxing. Maybe if I did martial arts, I could beat my dad or at least stand off on him. Now, bear in mind, I'm like 13, 14, so it's not going to happen. But, you have these wish fulfillments as a child, this kind of idea. And then Wadoryu Karate started in Pembroke, a little small town in Wales where I come from. And so I went along and I started training, and I absolutely loved it. I really thought it was the greatest thing I'd ever done. During this period, Bruce Lee had died. And so martial arts in general had this massive explosion. We had the Kung Fu clubs starting up. Any martial art clubs in the vicinity suddenly went from, say, 10 to 12 training regularly, maybe 20 on the books, to suddenly having like literally hundreds of people turning up to train, where we had to move from where we were into a big center.
I think similar situation was in Poland, because I remember my teacher was saying that, after Enter the Dragon, you have to have a queue and a list of people you could pick and choose, or you're not hard enough, you go away, you come in.
Yeah.
Imagine that now.
Yeah, well, we're back to kind of pre-Bruce Lee times again, aren't we? We're back to the kind of standardized classes and stuff. So I then, by happenstance, I then moved to Bristol, which now all of a sudden was like a smorgasbord of martial arts clubs. And I got to train with the Kyokushin, Stephen Greenwood from the Laugar Club, the Kung Fu Club. They're still doing really well in Bristol. The Wadoryu boys, I hooked up with them and started working with their Kumite teams. And now all of a sudden I got to explore all these other ones. To be honest, in many of them, with the exception of the Kyokushin and the Laugar, because the boys were really good in that, many of them I was quite disappointed. I had this image that if I went to a big city, these people would be so much better and they would have these great value sets, but very often it was a case of, oh, do you want to train? It's going to cost you this much. You have to buy this package. You have to buy our badges. You have to take that badge off. You have to put this badge on. And I was a little disappointed with that, but I still continued and I carried on training. And then I got the chance to work up in Sullom Voe, which is on the Shetland Islands. And it's a massive BP refinery. And at the time, it was the biggest industrial workplace, as in being built, construction, in Europe. It was absolutely massive. So there were 6,000 men working in a very enclosed environment. And these men really did range from saints to sinners. You met total psychopaths and you met absolutely amazing guys. And it was during this period, a friend of mine called Norman, we decided we used to train in the corner. We found each other. He did Shotokan, I did Wadoryu. You know, we used to train in the corner, and this eventually built up to a club. During this time, the Lerwick Karate Club, Lerwick is the main capital of Shetland, reached out to me if I would fancy coming down and doing some training with them. So I would drive down a couple of times a week and I would train, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. But the kumite was very bad. The kata and everything was okay in their basics. Their enthusiasm was amazing, you know, but they just didn't fight. And for me to do martial arts, you know, the key is in the word martial. You know, it's like you can do something that is martial arts influence. Don't get me wrong, that's absolutely fine. But if you're going to call something a martial art and you don't fight, you need to maybe think about what it is you're trying to do. You know, at least have some kind of physical contact in there, you know, for what we're doing. They also trained in a school hall, which during the summer shut. So a couple of the lads approached me and they said, if we get a hall during the summer, would you be prepared to train us? And I went, yeah, but we're just going to spar. We're just going to have fun. Nobody's going to get hurt. We're just going to spar, you know. And they were like, yeah, that works fine with us. Yeah, we're fine with that. And even in 81, 82, there's pictures online, we're experimenting with full contact. Do you remember I can't remember what they're called. I think they're called like Bong Su gloves, the ones that Bruce Lee wore in Enter the Dragon.
Yeah.
You remember, like big, big boxing gloves with fingers. So we had pairs of them. So we're experimenting with full contact karate. We were doing stuff like this, and we've got head guards on. And there's pictures, I think, on the Shetland Budokai website. There's a kind of picture of us doing this stuff. And so after the summer, the guys said they didn't want to go back to the Shotokan club. They wanted to keep this club going. So we decided to come up. The initial name we decided was Shetland Martial Arts Club, which was SMAC. So we had a big laugh about that. And then we just said, no, we need to take ourselves seriously. So we called ourselves the Shetland Budokai. And the club is still running up in Shetland, nearly 40 years later.
Amazing.
It's now run by a guy, it was run by a guy called Neil Pottinger, who trained with me when he was about 8 or 9. And his passion, he just kept going with his passion, you know. And so we started that. I then started experimenting with kickboxing. I went down to London and fought in a couple of kickboxing fights. I didn't like getting hit in the head, I will be honest, against guys who are much, much better than me. You're very limited in training partners in Shetland, as you can imagine. So after establishing the club, working the club through, I decided I think it was 82, I needed to do my Shodan, because the guy who was running the Lerwick Karate Club, the Shotokan Club, was away to do his Shodan. So I asked about I wanted a decent grade, and the name Jerry Bryan kept coming up as somebody who did very, very hard gradings, you know. So in November, I went to Leicester, 1982, I went to Leicester, and I did my grading with Jerry Bryan, but all his guys were knocked down. I didn't know what a leg kick was. I'm like, I'm going to come and look at it's like, womp. As I'm sparring, I was going, I don't even know how to block these. I was doing the Bambi jump, you know, when they kick and the vague hope that it won't catch you. I mean, these guys were incredible. They were really good. And I was going like, what is this witchcraft? What is it? I can't move my legs. I was quite poor at the time, and I had to travel down by train and overnight by train, but in a seat. On the way back, I kept cramping and just trying not to be a nuisance to other passengers. But then I started training with Jerry Bryan, and eventually the AMA then had a British knockdown squad, and eventually I made my way onto that as a kind of middleweight, and I started fighting with them, and it was doing the knockdown, which I preferred over getting punched in the face.
Was that under Kyokushin, or was it like independent knockdown?
So Jerry Bryan had left the Kyokushin because of politics. Again, I think it was to do with money and how much, all this kind of stuff, and he started his own system called Tessuyoi, which was kind of like a stripped out Kyokushin. Most of the
Mhm.
katas were gone. Everything was about sparring and hard work and hard training. One of the old, you couldn't do it nowadays, but one of the old blood up the dojo walls. You can
Mhm.
maybe do it in Romania or Russia nowadays, but you wouldn't get away with it most of the places now. Um, and I trained away with him. I entered in, I think it was 87, the Ross Frames Scottish knockdown competition,
Mhm.
and I won that. I was also doing clicker competitions. I quite like the clicker. There's some videos online of me doing a clicker event, and I really enjoyed them. They were great fun, and people from all over different styles and systems came in, and they were all, to a man, they were gentlemen. They were just,
Mhm.
it was really, really good. It was really nice to see. The same Ross Frame then gave me a book called Fighting Karate
Mhm.
by Hideaki Ashihara. And I read this and I had that same, what is this magic? I had that same, that kind of like, what? That last stuff was great, but this where you can grip and you can pull,
Mhm.
hikizushi, hikimawashi, and there's like, oh,
Mhm.
looks really good. So I started on my own dime traveling to London to train with a guy called Peter Rippin, who at that time was the British Ashihara representative.
I
Uh,
wasn't aware that Ashihara was in the UK because it's nowhere seen nowadays.
well, there are some very very good Ashihara clubs still in the UK. There are in Scotland,
Mhm.
but I think it's Nico as opposed to Ico.
Yeah.
So, but in 1991, a few of us from the AMA knockdown squad, myself included, went to Wiedebeek in Denmark, which is
Mhm.
where I met David Cook and Dave Yonkers. And the standard was stunning. I mean, honestly, the standard was just incredible. I'd never seen anything like it, the way they moved.
Mhm.
It was like seeing something in a film when you're used to this kind of stuff. Boom, 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 boom. One with the strongest body wins kind of idea to the people turning on angles, throwing Jonamawashes. It was just absolutely incredible. David Cook, the late David Cook, was, I think you had Tommy on your show.
Yep, yep.
Yeah, yeah. The late David Cook was incredible. He's English, so he delighted in speaking English again after speaking Swedish most of the time, So, and his wife Kikan, there was the whole Swedish and Danish crew were absolutely technically they were absolutely amazing. So I decided to make the switch at that point, and I switched across to Ashihara. And then in '92, I got offered to do my Sandan, but I was so in awe of the system that I just said, no, I'll do my Nidan 92, my Sandan 93, but
Mhm.
continually working, all the time with it,
Yeah.
because I just thought I'm just a fraud. If I go in and go for a third Dan after seeing these guys, I need to work. I need to work. So fortunately at that time, some of the Danish students had come across to live in Scotland. So I got to train with Morten Wagner, the late Thomas Fredrickson, and Melina Wagner. These people came over, and I got to train with them. So I did my 40-man fight. Never done a 40-man fight in my life before. Did a 40-man fight, and ended up with Martin van Emmen. I don't know if you know
Mhm.
Martin van Emmen.
Not personally, but heard of him.
He was world Thai boxing champion. He was just a machine. And he destroyed me in my 40th fight. I mean, I took months for my legs to come back to normal. And then in '93, I did my Sandan, and I did my 50-man fight. And this time approached it a little differently because I came straight out of the gate like I was doing a thing. And then I think in '95, I was awarded my Yondan. There was a big split up with I'd been working with David Cook on the Zushingen system,
Mhm.
because in '93 a friend of mine called Colin Whitehead, who wrote for Traditional Karate magazine, Terry O'Neill's Traditional Karate magazine, he was part of the oil and gas industry, and he was living in Japan, and he sent me a tape of Pancrase which with the Baz Rutten stuff. And this thing turned up on my doorstep in Aberdeen. And I put this in, and this was another case of, what is this wizardry? What is this? What is this? What? I've never seen. And so in '93, I also opened up an informal Pancrase class in Aberdeen. So in '93, I opened up the first kind of MMA club, in Scotland. The UFC started in late '93, but really started kicking off in '94. But we saw no VHS videos of it, I think, till probably about '95, '96, when it started appearing in the shops, because it had to come across from America.
Yeah, yeah.
And they were terribly priced. I remember they were like really expensive. So I started working on the Pancrase stuff and on like with the Ashihara. During this period, I met Kaicho. And Kaicho was just like, oh, let's see what you have on the floor. I always remember thinking, yeah, with this old man, huh? You know, old man, he was younger than I am now, right? But so I said, yeah, with this old man, you know, yeah, okay, yeah, I wrestle, I don't do judo, but yeah, okay, I'll take it easy. So he just goes, I'm old, let me go over here. And I was like, yeah, do what you want. And he goes, yeah, just get out. And I was like, yeah. I was like, I was going, is this man a sorcerer or something? I mean, he literally locked me in position until I just ran out of energy. I just couldn't believe it. And then he had the good grace to say, yeah, you're quite good. I just thought, what do you mean? Laying on the ground and sweating quite good? Is that a kind of thing? Do I get a mark for that? I didn't stop trying to get out. Like I said, there was a big split up in about 95, 96. And I didn't quite know where to go at this point. I didn't quite know what to do. Dave Yonkers was at that time going to be he did eventually carry on with the ICO, the Ashihara International Karate Organization, and he's done a tremendous job with that. He's done an absolutely incredible job. Davy Cook moved fully into the Zushin-gen and developed into it like this very robust system that you see that Tommy's part of. But I was kind of lost. I didn't quite know where I was going to go. And then John Bluming said, come with me. And I remember thinking, the all-round fighting, I remember thinking, why reinvent the wheel? You know, he's got this amazing system. I liked his humor. We got on, we made each other laugh. Mainly when I was doing groundwork. No, we made each other laugh. And we got on like really well. And then he just became my Kaicho up until he died in 2018.
There's lots of mixed opinions about John Blooming. Personally, I never met him, only heard stuff, but I assume that most is the political games and power plays from people who he left, and he come across to me in interviews as a straight talker, saying as it is. So I think he might have made a few enemies along the way because of just saying how it is.
He called bullshit when he saw it. I mean, that was it. And not only that, he had a history. You remember, in 1965, 66, he was the highest ranked Kyokushin guy in the world. And if people think and trust Oyama, then Oyama made him this. He made him. I think he was a sixth dan. I think he was sixth dan. You know, think about that for a second. 1965, 66, he was the highest ranking Kyokushin guy in the world, above Kenji. I think it was fifth dan at that time. And they got on tremendously well. They had tremendous, but he was a very straight speaking guy, and a lot of people just didn't like that. I did. I found it really refreshing that nothing was cloaked in some kind of either politically correct language. He just came straight out and said what it was. You know, yeah. I really, and of course that kind of thing, particularly when he turns around. I mean, he never called Oyama. He always called him the old man.
All right.
Always in my company. He goes, yeah. I remember one time with the old man. He said, one of my favorite stories is he's talking about groundwork when he's in the Hombu. And I think it was with Fujiwara was in there. There's a few in, and they're kind of like this. And he goes, yeah, but remember, I was like, Don F. Drager had trained me up. And he said I was like 120 kilos. So Draeger had actually kind of used Bluming, who at his height was very tall, you know that, but only weighed like 80 kilos.
Mm-hmm.
And then Draeger put like 40 kilos of muscle on him, you know, and he was doing the judo as well. He was well known in the judo. So he was in the changing room and he's talking about this. And Fujiwara kind of looked at him like, yeah, no, this is the strongest. And Bluming said, so I just jumped on him, threw him on the ground, and then tied him up with his belt, like hog tied him. And he said, I'm swinging him like this. And he said, oh, the language. He says, and I just looked like this. And he says, and there's the old man going, Baka. Like this. He goes, oh. He says, yeah. He said, he was mad at me for so long about that, you know. So he had these amazing stories at the conception of how Kyokushin was when it shifted from, I don't know if you remember this, it used to be called Oyama Karate.
Yeah.
It wasn't always called Kyokushin Karate. If you look at the old black belt magazines, you'll see that it was called Oyama Karate, and then it became Kyokushinkai Karate, you know. So he was there at the very, very beginnings of that. And he can call anybody out when they say, oh yeah, because in those times in the Hombu, they did that. And he will say, no, they didn't. I was there and they didn't do that.
Yeah, this is interesting for I see that all the time now, you know, you show something with a groundwork. I never done in karate groundwork. I learning from BJJ. I done wrestling, but you show it, you know, the wrestling changed my karate. I do this throw. Oh no, we used to do it in 80s. We all done it. Well, so why nobody does it now?
No.
Right? It suddenly disappeared.
Yeah. I'm also a little bit weary, a little bit cautious when people say all these throws are hidden within kata.
Oh, yeah.
And you go, why are they hidden?
Mm.
I mean, when they started doing the judo, they didn't hide their throws in something. They just threw each other. And it's like, sometimes I tell you what it sometimes reminds me of. I have this little thing I say to people. I say, it's like somebody at an art gallery putting up a plain white picture, nothing on it, just a plain white picture. And underneath it says, the scream of the existential soul in an uncaring universe. And people are standing in front of it and beard. Yes. Oh, that's deep. Yes, I can see where that's coming from. No, mate, it's an unpainted canvas I've stuck up with a fancy title. Right? And sometimes I think people do that with martial arts. They overdo stuff. They say, yes, this movement here, it's you're gripping and lifting with this hand and then spinning them around with this hand like a plate or something and then throwing them. And you go like, then why not just do it, mate? Why are you just not doing it? I had a friend once who asked me to look at his syllabus. And I looked at his syllabus and I just said, what I can't understand is you have Hian Nidanin for your first one, but a lot of the stuff, like this kind of Tetsui stuff and things, you're not teaching. Why aren't you teaching everything that's in your kata? They should be your kihon. So your kihon should make up your kata. So if you're doing Hion Shodan, you know, like this one, you need to be teaching that as a basic. Otherwise, it's just something you throw in occasionally. It's like people who say, we teach self-defense at our karate club. And you go, wow, yeah, really good. What, like 50 minutes every lesson? No, every couple of months. You know, people only work truly well through repetition. Repetition, repetition, repetition. The reason being is if you are stress attacked, you have a tendency to freeze. Most people go fight or flight, but that's not the one that they do. Most people freeze. And you have to train your body to react when you've frozen. When your brain has gone like this and your body's all tense, you have to train your body for your body to react if your mind isn't working correctly. And if you're wanting to do techniques that work, like say for this one, for example, okay, then you need to train your body to be able to do that technique. I remember one Japanese guy once, I think it was Maeda, one time said, pick a kata and only train that kata. So if you do Kyushankyu or Kankyu-dai, I think it is, then just do that and do nothing else. Just train it. Every single movement, train it for real life situations. Boom, train it, train it, train it. You know what I mean? Over and over and over. That's, if I have any advice, I would say that.
Mm.
And I was like, wow, I can see that. I know people who know like 15, 20 kata, but they never use any of those movements in fighting.
Mm.
So I
How
think
is with in Budokai with the kata structure and so on?
we don't have kata.
You dropped it completely?
No, no, we have various clubs run their own things, but it's kumite based. So you have a
Mm-hmm.
series of fights as you work your way through with the expectation, and it's all round fighting.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, my Polish student Stanislaw, he was the first one to do a true all-round fighting. He did 30 fights, and in those 30 fights, he did boxing,
Mm-hmm.
he did kickboxing, he did grappling, he did ground and pound, he did MMA, he did knockdown.
Mm-hmm.
And we went to Belgium with Kaicho Eric's clubs, and he did it there. And he's one of the first ones to do a true all-round fighting, where you can turn around and he'll say like, yeah, I can box. I'm not a great boxer because I don't do boxing, but I'll go in the ring and work here a little bit, or I can do kickboxing, or I can, yeah, my grappling's okay, but I'm not keen on the ground and pound stuff. I'm not keen on the strikes on the ground, but I'll quite. But he did all of that, and that was what Kaicho's vision was, to have people who could work really well in almost everything. And
Mm-hmm.
it's not a jack of all trades, because it's all based on the same thing. A punch is a punch is a punch is a punch
Mm-hmm.
kind of idea. So within the Budokai system, there are no formal kata. If somebody wants to do kata as an auxiliary to their gradings, but it cannot affect the mark of the grading.
Mm-hmm. That's
So if you
interesting.
say, yeah, so we need to put in this kind of kata. And at the end of it, you change. So I'm 66 now. Okay. So my leapy abouts, jumping my Toby Garys and stuff like this stays long behind me.
Mm-hmm.
My rest, one of the few things you can do as you get older is you can still wrestle if your
Mm-hmm.
wrestling is okay. I mean, okay, I struggle so much against bendy BJJ guys, can lay on their back and their feet are
Yeah,
here.
yeah,
And they just come around, you just go, no, 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 this is unnatural, son. I want to see you when you're 60 doing this. Because trust me, you won't be. Somebody once said, you never see old people in a sport taekwondo club.
yeah. Mm. Very
Because
true.
they can only kick gi down effectively. So within the Kyokushin Budokai, it's basically about stripping martial arts like John Blooming's philosophy, stripping it back to what works. And a good instructor will work for the students with what works for them. So if I'm fighting a rangy, tall, slim guy, I'll be working on his long range strikes and knee strikes when you're in close. Okay.
Yep.
And how can he best protect himself if he gets taken to the ground, because he has long levers that you can pull about and stuff like this. If you're a short guy, what's the best way to work with a short guy? Is he a short guy that's passive, short guy that's aggressive? I'm a short guy. I'm a short, aggressive guy when I fight, That doesn't always work out to my advantage, So, and it's about, there's an element of individualization within the system that often doesn't exist in some other systems.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I
You
can
know,
see that. So why staying with the Kyokushin name? Was there as a pay of respect, or why John?
yeah. That's what my belief is that he, right up until the end of John Blooming, he always loved the old man, as he called it. He just loved
Mhm.
him. It just said the best thing that ever happened to him back in the old days. I mean, there's so many stories to recount about, that he's told myself and others. I'm just not the only one. He's got a lot of other, a lot of other close friends. And I think the Kyokushin came about out of the respect, and because he still did the low kicks. And if you ever saw John
Mm.
Blooming's fighting stance, it was very. Have you ever watched the very first knockdown tournaments?
Yes.
You see how they fight? They're like this,
Yeah, yeah,
you
yeah,
know.
yeah. Very
Hideo
Oyama-like.
Ashihara said that your guard should be like the antennae of an ant.
Hmm. Yeah.
And if you look at the old ones, they look kind of like Gojo guys.
Hmm.
Because the Gojo, they often fight in Niku Achidachi, they fight in cat
Mm.
stance, and you see their hands are like this, vary because they're going for eye jabs and throat punches. And if you look at the very early stuff, it wasn't about standing there and getting punished. It was obviously they still drove forward, but there was a much more touchy-feely element to it. They look for me, as an old man, they look sensational. They look absolutely amazing. And that's the era that John Bluming came through. He came through the era where it wasn't about money. It was all about trust and friendship and things like this. It was all about that. It was all about developing like a family. Everyone suffered, everyone trained, and I think when he eventually decided to do his own system, which basically was knockdown with groundwork, obviously because of Kaicho's judo experience, then I think he just kept the name going as Kyokushin Budokai, and it's now seen as an offshoot of Kyokushin. Obviously, I mean, you can't have somebody who in 1966 was the sixth dan, the highest graded, and then say, "Oh, he had nothing to do with Kyokushin." I mean, that's just
for sure, for sure.
You know.
Changing the subject a little bit, I got a great gift from you. I don't know if your
Oh,
camera
did
gonna
you
pick.
enjoy it?
I am only starting because of commitments and children. I don't have time. But yesterday, I actually changed my approach to my home structure because of your book, and I want to talk
Really?
about it. Yes,
Okay.
I love the idea of home motto, and I was thinking
Ah,
like in the evening, huh, I've got one for me, but I don't have it for home. I need to address that. So I made a plaque. It's coming this Saturday. It's gonna be hanging, and our motto is strong and caring.
well, could you do me a favor? Send me a photo of it. I would love to see that.
I will. I will. It was like 11 o'clock at night. I love the idea. Can you talk about this idea and the structure, how that impacts a family structure and kids upbringing? And I'm gonna just put the power on so my computer doesn't die while you're talking. Okay?
It's okay. That's fine. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I actually have a bit here.
Okay.
So no, it's okay. Yeah, I was just going to say, I couldn't find it the other day because I had it stuck away somewhere, And within it, I talk about schools, about school mottos, and
Yeah.
about how they seem to have pretty much disappeared. Um, it came after the conversation that I'd had with some parents one time about their child, and I'd listened to their problems, and I'd said to them, do you really want to know what the main cause of the problem is? And they said, yes, 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 of course, of course. And I said, you're the main cause of the problem. You are the main cause of the problem. You are allowing other institutions to influence your family environment. And I think it's a really good thing to have a motto, to have your own family motto, So I'll just really, the examples I gave were my school mottos, which nowadays you just don't tend to have it. So this was my old school motto, right? This is what it says. This is the second school I was in. Play the game, whatever you do. That's good advice. You've agreed to play to a set of rules. You are playing a game. These are the rules. You've agreed to them. This is society. This is your house. These are the rules. You agreed to work them, Do your duty at any cost. And this is why taking on a role and agreeing to do it, your duty, giri is what they call it in Japanese, is a really important thing. My duty as an instructor, when I'm teaching people, is to provide a safe, empowering environment where people learn, where people can stop and put their hand up and just go, I'm not getting this. I don't quite understand where you're coming from with this. And I can say, good question, stop the class, and then explain it in greater detail. Just on that, I have a little trick you might want to use, right? And it changes how people look at what you're doing. It changes it completely, okay? So let's just say I'm teaching you. Let's just say I'm teaching you my version of hikimoshi. Okay, so grabbing, tugging, and rotating, right? I will say to you, okay, so this is how it works. So when you're teaching this, it's really important that you establish the grip like this. By adding the words in, when you teach this, it changes how you see it. It's no longer about you anymore. You're now learning for other people. And how you take that knowledge and put it in your brain is a completely different folder. It's not shoved in the folder, then shoved at the back of the and shoved at the back of the bookcase. It's something that you have to have. And very often when I'm teaching, I'll say to them, listen, when you're teaching this, it's really important that you operate on this, or you do this, or you do this movement here when you go beforehand. And that works really well. Slightly digressed on
I
that,
will
you know?
try that tonight.
Yeah, just say to them quietly, just say to them, right, listen, when you have to teach this, or when you go to show this to somebody, when you need to show this, right, pay particular attention, and you see people sit and watch, as opposed to kind of like wondering what they're going to have for supper or something later on. You know, you'll see them sit and watch because they're going, oh crap, there'll be an exam at this at some point. You
No.
know what I mean? Not an exam as such, you know, but kind of like
Yeah,
a
but
life
somebody's
exam.
gonna judge me.
Yeah. So the next line was, do the right because it is right. Now, how many people don't do what is right anymore? You see something, do you challenge that?
Sometimes depends.
Yeah, and there is a depend on it, isn't it? You know what I mean? Some people do, some people don't. Oh, I saw this terrible thing, and I say to them, "Oh, what did you do?" "Oh, nothing. It's not my problem." Yeah, it is a problem because you're carrying it around in your head. You know, avoid mean actions. Don't be mean to people. Be kind. Be compassionate. You know, and help the weak and those that are down. Now, that is a school motto that we were taught as kids: help the weak and those that are down. And so I think it's really good and fun as a family to sit down and go, we want a little motto. So if this motto now, when your children have children, they will say, my grandfather used to say. And then we start getting linkage then. We start getting this a sense of being part of history. There is a link between you and your grandson, your granddaughter, your great-grandson, your great-granddaughter. And you can do this by simple actions. And so many people nowadays, I say to them, like, who is your great-grandfather? And they don't know. They have no idea who their great-grandfather is. And that's sad.
I'm in that category. So I ask my mom and my dad, and they never been talking about it. They don't know, partly because of war and stuff like that. So our family was scattered. Some been in France, some been in Ukraine, and so on. But never been that transition of the family tree. So I don't really know what my grandfather, except that he was a minor village mayor. I have no clue who he really was, and the other one don't know either. And even my mom doesn't know because their parents didn't say who was before and stuff like that. So I really not suffer, but it's a shame because I would love to know the history of the family.
Yeah, and I think it's a good thing to hand on to your children. You know,
For
to
sure.
see where they are in the world, where they've come from, you know, where their beginnings come from. And so for me, having this, taking something and crystallizing it down gives you something to work towards. You know, this is our oath. This is what we carry within us. You know, Stat Domus Fortuna is the house one. It's not my one, which means good fortune on this house. You know, so that's kind of be much more kind of a capitalist one. But I think good fortune doesn't necessarily mean money. It just means, you know, stuff from there. But I think it's really important that you find, this is the reason why for myself, I was looking around. So my work, we shift slightly away from the karate. So my work predominantly has been with young people. And prior to this job, I'm retiring this year. Prior to this job that I'm in at the moment, I worked with young people who had quite serious social, emotional, and behavioral problems. And these would manifest in many different ways. Amongst young men, it often meant drinking, drugs, and violence. Within the young women, sometimes it could manifest as promiscuity, stealing. You can interchange these. You can interchange these within it, you know. But without a doubt, 99% of them, the problem was the parents. The problem was the parents. The parents were wayward. They were maybe drinks, drugs. There was a failure to thrive, that maybe emotionally they were unable to give their children the right kind of um, positive reinforcement, positive, workings, positive emotions, good empathy, or even sympathy. They were unable to do that, and we ended up. I worked particularly well with young men, basically because I tried to live my life as I told them they had to live their life. And that can be very difficult for adults. If you have a child, and I write about it in this book, the opening pages, I say, it all has to start with yourself. You cannot tell your child, don't do this. Listen, son, tell you right now, never smoke. And you're going, but Dad, I love you, and you're smoking. So it can't be bad. If you don't want your child to smoke, you have to not smoke. If you don't want your child to drink, you have to not drink. If you want your child to have a good work ethic, you have to have a good work ethic. And that's a simple fact of it. This is how they learn in these social groups. This is how they learn.
Yeah.
And so a lot of these particularly these young men would come in with extraordinary. Eventually, I had my own unit called the Close Support Unit, which was the ones that were the most complex, the most complex. And at that point, I did notice there was a tendency for medication to start seeping in, Ritalin and stuff like this. And I don't know, I'm kind of up in the air about that kind of stuff sometimes. One of the biggest tricks I think in some cases pharmaceutical industries ever did was us allowing to medicate our kids without a blink of an eye. It should be an extraordinarily difficult thing. It should be something that's really well thought out. And the doctor explains the pros and the cons. The psychiatrist explains to you the pros and the cons, not just, I think your child is ADHD, put him on this.
Yeah, I think it's a kind of easy escape for people, right? As parents, it's easy to go into looking for a very easy fix. I'll just give him a tablet and he's gonna be better.
But
Uh,
there's another thing with that, right? There's another thing. We used to call it within our work group. We used to call it the medicalization of children. So not you personally, I know it's not you. The parent has failed to offer any of the kind of bullet points that the child needs to thrive, right? So we used to call these things. We used to have these things called chaos children, where they thrive in chaos because that's all they've ever known. They've only ever known chaos. That child then is taken to a child psychiatrist and presents in certain manners. Okay, the child psychiatrist then says they have ADHD or they're on the spectrum or whatever else like this. Instantly, the parent who has not invested in their child the way they should do this. It's not my fault. My child has ADHD. It's not me. And you're going like, no, they've got this. This thing just doesn't happen. It's not a genetic thing. This is not like type 1 diabetes, mate. You have a responsibility. If you decide to have a child and you want that child to be better than you, what parent doesn't? One of your jobs as a father is not to be your son's best friend.
Yeah.
He has a best friend, right? Your job is to navigate around your shipwrecks. I did that once, son, and this is what happened. So I'd advise you not to do that. He's to respect you, to want to be like you, to be his own person, but I want to be like my father. And some people are not prepared to invest in that, and they shoo it off. They find this simple medicalization of children, and that makes me very annoyed sometimes. That really does make me very annoyed. And I worked predominantly in the environment until it actually burnt me out. I got burnt out with it. I had a friend who had a couple of kids, and they were just normal kids, and they were my palate cleansers, if you know what I mean. I would go like, "Hey, how are you getting on?" kind of ideas, and just to reinforce when you're working sometimes for like 15 hours in this environment. If you're dealing with a young person in crisis, I'm not going to go home at the end of my shift.
Yeah.
At the end of my shift, I'm not going to go, "Yeah, that's me clocking off. See you later, boy." And he's like, but we're just talking. You have to stay there for as long as you can. You have to stay there to try and work it through. And I'd gone to see his kids, and one of them said, "Would you like a sweet?" the first thing I thought was, what do you want?
Mm.
Which I never did before. Second thing I thought straight on was, what have you done with them? Because
Mm.
sometimes young people do terrible things to sweets and then give them to staff,
Mm.
and a staff member trying to bridge a gap between them. Like, oh, thank you so much. You learn the trick of going, oh, thank you so much. I'll keep it for later. Put it in your pocket and then
Mm.
and throw it in a bin when they're not around, kind of idea. But most of the stuff that you saw, the violence, the swearing, the cursing, everything else that is kind of always directed towards you, you have to realize it's like, there's a question I say to people. People say to me sometimes, if you could say, what do you do? And they're saying, like, here's a thing that works for almost every single thing in your life. Look at it and you go, what is its function?
Mm.
I start to shout at you in the street. Why am I shouting at you in the street? Why have I suddenly become aggressive? What is the function? What am I attempting within myself to do? Am I angry at something? Do you remind me of somebody that I hate? What is its function? What is its purpose? And you can do this with kata. You can do this in interactions. It's a
Mm.
simple, it's not foolproof, but it really is. If your son is suddenly doing something and you go like, what is he up to? What's a
Mm.
function behind what he's doing at the moment? What is he attempting to either put across to me, or what is he attempting to negotiate? One of the best things you can give a child is self-discipline.
Mhm.
And the way you get a child to have good self-discipline is by giving them appropriate discipline. Now, we're not talking about hitting. We're talking about, no, you're going to bed at 8 o'clock. No, you're not taking your phone with you. And young people unconsciously feel very safe when there are boundaries placed around them,
Mhm.
because they know beyond those boundaries you will challenge them, but you will also challenge anybody that attempts to come into those boundaries. They feel quite safe. So good self-discipline, which martial arts bring about, gives, for myself, two very important things for young people. It gives them impulse control, like this. What's that?
Mm.
Oh, give me that kind of idea. And it gives them good forward planning skills. So I want that book, but it's your book. So I would go, I won't snatch it now, but I maybe
Mhm.
know you might know, and I might say, do you fancy a cup of tea, Les? You go, I love a cup of tea. And you go, oh, here's a cup of tea. Could I maybe just have a little look at your book? I've given
Mm.
you a gift. Can I maybe have a look at your book now? And you'll go like, yeah, but don't get it dirty. And you go like, oh, thank
Mm.
you. And then I pick it up and I look at it. So it doesn't sound like much, but self-discipline is probably one of the best things you can give. It gives resilience. Good self-discipline brings resilience for these things. And it also aids with mental health. So as I worked with these young people, the one thing I noticed they were absolutely missing was a path. They
Mhm.
had no way. They their way was the next hedonistic experience. Their way was the next drink. It was the next joint. It was the next pill. Very often it was like that. It was transient experiences that they worked towards, you know. Um, and so what I would often attempt to do is to find something that I could give them away on, even if they had a minor interest in football.
Mhm.
And I hate football. I never watch football, right? But I would go away. We had a young lad that was really into Celtic Football Club.
Mhm.
So I went away and I read up about it so I could start bridging this gap between him, then find
Mhm.
out who his heroes were, and then use those as a kind of mirror to reflect back what was bad societal behavior. I'm going like, well, do you think he would do that? Do you think that would be like that? To try and evolve him around positive stuff the whole time,
Mhm.
as opposed to, and it's difficult because it is genuinely one step forward, two steps back often. It can be kind of very, very difficult. And so while I was doing this, I started looking for the motto thing. What can I do to, what could I, what, what philosophy could I give that is really easy for parents to look at, very easy to pass on, not complicated at all, And you can take a single section like this and
Mhm.
build it into tens of different things, you know? And most of the stuff was too complex. Most of it will require far too much for a parent or an adult to want to do. So I then came back to what was the Bushido virtues.
Mhm.
And I started looking at them very closely. They're in. I don't know if you've got to that section yet. They're expanded on
No,
in here.
not yet, not yet.
There's a whole section of them that expanded on in there. What each one truly means. So for example, one of the Bushido. So really quickly, I took away the word Bushido out of it,
Hmm.
and I put the word Budo in instead. And that's mainly because during the Tokugawa era, Bushido, when it started virtues, when it started to flourish, were very much influenced by Confucianism, but it was a non-warring. It was 200 years of peace.
Yeah.
So they were very much that white portrait thing. You know,
Hmm.
they were very much built around old stories and old things. Um, they weren't codified. The ones we know now, the courage, respect, loyalty, honesty, rectitude, and benevolence. All these ones weren't codified really until 1908,
Hmm.
when the Bushido by Nitobe's book came out, right? So up until then, each family had their own motto. Each family had their own virtues. It wasn't
Okay.
until they became codified. And Nitobe actually was a Christian, interestingly. Most people don't know
Mm.
that, but he's actually a Christian. So these were then codified. But they are very cleverly codified. They're a very clever series of ones based on chivalry. They're actually based on Victorian chivalry, because Victorians at that point were all over the
Yeah.
place. And, you know, so I started looking more at these, and I thought, this is really good. This is like really, really good, as long as you understand the origins of the words, what they truly meant at the time. So let's just take respect, right? This,
Mm.
you hear this a lot now. People say, you must respect me. And I go, no, I don't know. No, because I don't know you.
Mm.
I will be tolerant, considerate, and kind to you, but I won't respect you. Because the word respect, the antecedent of the word means to look back. So I can respect you for collecting stamps. You've done it for
Hmm.
years, right? I have no, no interest in collecting stamps myself, but I can respect you because you've stuck at it. This has been who you have been. You have stuck at it. That shows what you are as a person. You have this ability to stick and not be sidetracked by things. It's actually rectitude is also, that would be, rectitude is the art of being straight, working straight through. So when you actually start looking at these things and breaking them down, I thought, something, there is a ready-made philosophy here that all I have to do is expand on and say to people. So the more I looked at it, the more I developed them, I suddenly realized that there are two elements to this that help with mental health.
Hmm.
Okay, so everyone understands the external virtues. Okay, I am loyal to you, I respect you, I'm courageous for you, I'm benevolent towards you. You understand these kind of, my loyalty to you is unwavering, right? But if you take these and move them internally, they really start to help you. Do you respect yourself, or do you put yourself down all the time? Is there that element of your first interactions with your father still within yourself, where you,
Mm.
because I often see my reactions to certain things as a direct result of my interactions with my violent father,
Yeah.
right? You cannot carry this. You can overcome this. You will never get rid of it, but you can sticking plaster it.
Mm.
You can adapt to it, but you can never, because it is part of who you are as a person. And you just have to learn to accept that, right? And respect yourself, and respect and understand where you have come from and how much you have done to overcome these things, overcome the lack of emotion, the lack of love, the lack of warmth, and how you have used that as a tool to make certain that never happens with your children. I am the opposite of my father. I would imagine in many ways, only for reading the book. So don't get me wrong. I'm
Mm.
just reading from reading your book. I would imagine that you, in many ways, are the opposite of your father.
Oh yes.
See?
In
So,
in many ways, I look at it like, why did I do that? It's just like him. It's just like.
See, so there is a bonus to a degree. We carry that, so our children don't have to carry that.
Mm.
That is why we are Budoka. And this is what it means partly to be a Budoka. We will carry these things. We will not make a thing about these things, but we will make certain that we don't carry. My father was a wife beater. The majority of young men that observe their parents, their father beating their wives, go on to be wife beaters.
Mm.
Right? I didn't. Never laid a hand on a woman except sparring. Maybe my sister when I was 8 or 9, punching her because she'd stole my comic or something. You know what I mean? Though,
Yeah.
So I have worked hard to become the man my father wasn't.
Mm.
I have become hard to become more like this man, who is everything I would have wanted in a father. So how can I take this, what I'm trying to express to you, what me and you are talking about, the fact that
Mm-hmm.
we're trying not to be like our fathers, right? How can we convert that into a simple working, a living philosophy? Not one that's cold, not one you read, as a living philosophy that you take with you every day. And for me, by reworking and relooking and changing them to call Budo virtues as opposed to Bushido virtues, we take away the whole Second World War xenophobic actions that came
Mm-hmm.
about with this. So how can we take that and work that and show people that, listen, yes, we can use these externally, but we can also use these internally. Am I courageous enough, to stand up to what my father did to me? Am I courageous enough to look at it? Just look at it. Don't give it a value, but just look at how he acted. And what this did was this made me suddenly realize how extraordinarily affected I was by my father's violence, to looking at why was my father violent. So why was your father quite cold towards you?
I think he never experienced himself because in generation in Poland, in his family, so I'm the first one who actually stopped. Being alcoholism was the norm. So, his father never been, and his father died very young, so he had a stepfather, which I expect he was like your father, strict rules, beatings regularly, because that's how you bring up the strong man, right? So it's just kind of cascade of not showing the emotions and kind of praising people
Mhm.
and drinking alcohol all the time. So I don't drink at all. And praising my son all the time and, trying to be a opposite to my father, like you said.
But think about what you've done.
Mm.
You have taken a line of, I'm trying to get in here. You've taken a line of ancestors, okay, and you have broken that line.
Mm.
Do you know how extraordinarily difficult that is? Do you know how, when I look at you, I just suddenly think, this is extraordinary. What an extraordinary man. You have
Thank you.
taken this and you have changed it. You are aware that it has left you with problems, but you're not allowing these problems to cause any kind of disturbance with your everyday function.
Mm.
So for myself, it was all about violence. Every martial art I've done has been successively more violent. Wadoryu to Tessioi to Ashihara, Ashihara to Kyokushin Budokai, and but prior the jump within that was MMA
Mm.
as well. So it's very clear. I have progressively throughout my life tried to find a better way to protect my mother.
Mm.
I'm not slow at this. I understand myself. I spend ages just looking at myself. A gift that my father gave me without him realizing it was a favorite trick of his, if he wasn't hitting me, was to do, he used to do kind of tortures. I don't mean like
Mm.
kind of
Mm.
physical stuff. So a favorite of his was to stand me in a corner for hours, just standing in a corner, facing a corner for hours.
Mm.
And usually try to do it if my favorite program was on TV. And he would sit watching me, not watching the TV. He'd maybe have his
Mm-hmm.
paper and he'd be looking across. And he was just waiting for this look so he could run over and punch me or slap me on the head because I'd broken his rules in his house,
Mm-hmm.
kind of idea. But what happened for me was I started to learn to run films in my head. I would like think about a book and I would like develop
Mm.
little stories in my head. I would become quite creative like that. And then one day I was stood there and my legs ached. I was only young. I was like 8 or 9, and my little legs really couldn't. My legs were sore. I think I'd
Mm-hmm.
been cycling that day or something, and I had the temerity to be 5 minutes late for my tea. So I have no tea. I go to bed hungry and I have to stand in the corner for 2 or 3 hours. It's that kind of, because obviously I'm taking the mickey out of him for doing this. I'm not a child out with the breeze in my hair with my friends on my bike. I'm cycling around going, I'm not going home because I hate him. So, so that's how he always thought, And then when I was there, I started to look at the feelings in my legs like I'd never seen them before. I don't know if you've ever done that. If you have
Yeah,
like took a bike.
I done that with in the mental health charity I work for them. We had a lady taking us through mindfulness, and she was doing something like that.
Yeah, so I'm 8 years old, and I start looking at the feeling in my legs as though it's shapes and colors. I keep changing it in my head. Then I suddenly realized, I suddenly thought, who is looking at this? Who is it? I'm aware of myself being aware of myself, right? And then I had this kind of, almost like I felt like I'd flipped backwards. It's like I call it a mirror. When you put mirrors in front of each other and they disappear into it. And then I suddenly had this, who is it that's looking at, who is it looking at, who is it looking at, who's it looking, like this kind of, it was kind of very overwhelming for me. It was, I started to kind of half panic. And my way around it was just to look. And as I started to panic, I looked at the panicking, right? Like I'd not seen it before. And I realized that the panicking was the problem. So if I can just look at the panicking and just look at everything and not give it any kind of plus or minus, good or bad, then maybe that would help me. And I used to get immense calm doing this. And how I beat him at his game is he'd stood me in the corner for about 3 odd hours. And he said to me, right, get out. And I just went, no, you're okay. I'm quite happy here. And he said, well, stay there then. But every 10 minutes, he kept coming in. He walked away, and I was still stood there. I hadn't moved. And after about an hour, he literally dragged me by the hair out of the corner. And he never did it again. But the little trick of watching became part of who I was for quite a while. Then it kind of, as I hit kind of 12, 13, it kind of dissipated a bit. I didn't really pay much attention to it because I didn't, my father was now in the pub. When he did interact with me, he's incredibly violent, but a lot of the time he was drunk and never bothering with me. We made up, me and my sister made our own lunches. We went to school. Sometimes we didn't go to school. Sometimes we'd come in late. He never knew where we were, nor did he really seem to care at that particular point. And then it wasn't until later when I met Alan, who actually lectures on consciousness, that I started to become more involved with it again. And that's why I brought in the internal element into the looking at the Budo virtues and saying like there are basically two bits. There's an internal aspect to it, and there is an external aspect. External is what I'm showing you, where I'm being loyal to you as a friend, loyal to you as a Budoka, something like this, And then when I looked at it even further, and you can see this it's in chapter 9. You see this? It's this weird looking fuzzy dot thing. I started saying like, well, do I have to show this to everybody? Do I have to be extremely loyal to every single person I have? And I realized I couldn't be. I should be most loyal. The Budo virtues themselves should be most shown to my family and those I class as family. That's a proper bit you need to add on that. There's an old Persian saying that rarely under the same roof do two brothers grow. It's a lovely.
We've got a saying in Poland that you come out with family best on the pictures.
yeah, that's really. Actually, my favorite saying is Polish. Do you know that?
Which one?
And I can't say it properly because I'm trying to learn it. It's like "Nie mój cirk," not my circus, not my.
Yeah, not my monkeys. Yeah.
yeah. Not my circus, not my monkeys. And I use that quite a lot. Somebody go, "Oh, what about this?" And I just go, "No, nie mój cirk, nie małpy."
Nie mój cyrk, nie moje małpy.
Nie moja małpy, nie moje małpy. Yeah, I keep missing the A out. Yeah. So because the cleaner at my work is Polish, and she translated it for me. And I've been trying to learn it, but I'm not very good. My Polish is awful. But so for myself, I've got my 5th book coming out, which is taking a lot of this stuff and it's developed still further, as things should do. You know, things shouldn't be static, they should be developed further. And I've changed this very, very slightly, but basically the virtues should be shown all the time. Your loyalty, your courage, your respect should be shown to your family members, and or those you class as family. And then as you spread outwards, if you look at it like a newspaper print, where you have dots or individuals, but these dots are in constant movement. So the next thing is you have your friends, like best friends closer to you, working out to friends, and you have acquaintances, then you have the other, which are people you pass every day, like a ticket collector at a railway station.
Yeah.
Now, it might be for 3-4 years you hand him the ticket. Then one day he says like, oh, I see you've got your new backpack with you. And you go like, yeah, yeah. And then you find out his name is Oliver. And as you come out, you go, hi, Oliver. And he goes like, yeah, hi, Les, how's things? You're training today? Yeah, yeah, yeah. And now he's moved from other to acquaintance.
Yeah.
Do you see what I mean? These things, human beings move. We move through space and time. Sometimes we're closer to each other. Sometimes we're further away. Sometimes a best friend will move abroad and then you never really hear from them. You do for a few, sometimes you never ever thought will suddenly move into your arc and become a very good friend to you or something like this, So it's trying to figure out, where do we do these virtues? Where can we always, but you always, always apply them to yourself. You always apply them to yourself. You're courageous about it. You don't veer off. Just because somebody says something different, you go, oh, I don't want to cause problems or something. You just go like, no, I disagree with you. It's okay for us to disagree. I just disagree with you. And here's the reason why. When I was at work, I was always known as the guy that said the N word. And the N word was no. So many other staff would always go, oh, yeah, okay, to stop the problems. But you're not building self-discipline then. You are not building any kind of self-discipline at all with it. But I always said no. And here's the reason why. You promised me you would tidy your bedroom. Your bedroom's like a tip, so you're not getting to go to the pictures tonight. That was our agreement. We shook on it. There's the violence, because he's learned if he's violent to his mother, then his mother capitulates and gives him money. And I often used to say to them, like, does that work with your mum? Because it ain't going to work with me. We agreed. We shook hands as men on the deal. And you haven't done your end of the deal, so you're not getting to go to the pictures. What if I go and tidy up now? I have no problem with that. So that always works really well. And a great way to get kids to understand how society works, I know its boundaries are a bit amorphous sometimes, but a good way is to never give them an answer. So let's just say Max kicks his door, right? Puts a hole in his door, a little dent in his door, and you go up to him and you say, did you kick that because I wouldn't give you a bar of chocolate? He will instantly say yes. Right? But if you say to him, why did you kick that? Right? Because you wouldn't give me a bar of chocolate. Why wouldn't I give you a bar of chocolate? Because it was too close to dinner. So why is dinner important? So, yeah. So you can, or you can go down the whole thing. Do you think it's appropriate for you to kick the door? Why did you kick it? Is that appropriate? Is that what people do? So how do normal people handle this? How should you have handled this? And what it's forcing a child to do is to look at what is considered normal, rational behavior within a group. And it looks at that as opposed to it's only between him and you. Does that make any sense? I don't know if I explained it.
Yeah. I'm just processing in and trying to remember it so I can implement
it. yeah. Do not affiliate a value to it. Because when you bring a value in, you'll often bring emotion in. And the idea is to be as objective as possible, because you want the child to understand what would be considered, so if the child is out, I use Max, I shouldn't really use Max because he's a lovely kid. He's probably a lovely kid, but if the child is out and then kicks somebody else's door, what's going to happen? And that happened because you allowed the child to kick the door at home with no consequences. The consequence, you don't have to punish them. The consequence is we are going to go through this together. Me and you are
Mm.
going to sit down and look at your behavior, and I am not going to supply you with an answer, young man. You are going to give me all the answers. And eventually we'll say, I shouldn't have done it because it's wrong, because people don't kick doors. And you go, perfect. You
Yeah,
can have your bar of chocolate after.
we often use that, think about it, you tell me, you think about it, and he comes up with his own answer. So I kind of halfway there, I think.
It depends on their cognitive reasoning and their age. Sometimes you have to guide them. Because if you
Mm.
say to a child at like 5 or 6, think about it, he's just going, I thought about it. You should have given me the chocolate. You see
I
what I
think,
mean?
yeah, we are very
Yeah.
fortunate with Max. Max is very analytic, and swear he's the 20-year-old trapped in the body of 7-year-old sometimes, because he's just, yeah, he's way cleverer than I am. On the other hand, my daughter is very fast to hit instead of think. Her first answer is, I punch you.
How old is she?
5.
Yeah, yeah. There's a. I go. There's a. This might help, but there's a whole section here. It goes through them as their age, how their
Mm,
mind develops, how they start to work, and it's just I'll punch you, and you go, I don't, I wouldn't like that. Why would you want to hit
mm,
me? You
yeah.
know, because I get my bar of chocolate. Well, no, I would stop giving you chocolate.
No, her
So why?
her answer is, because I like it. So, so I
Is
keep
the
trying
world
to,
yeah, is the
you
world
know,
only made up of yourself? That's what I used to say to
uh,
kids. Is the world only made up of yourself? No,
but as the girls are, I think that was the same situation with your dad when you said he didn't never hit your daughter, hit your sister. It's that the girls got their own ways to wrap around it, that I'm completely wrap around her fingers, and she can get away with much more than Max, which is other way with my wife. Max can
yeah.
get away with much more than she
Well,
can. So
remember the old expression, "Daddy's girl, mummy's boy."
yeah, yeah.
That's like years. That's kind of like absolutely years old. And what was really interesting for myself was that my father left my mother and went off with an older woman, leaving my mum with quite a lot of debt. But what was interesting is I saw this repeating pattern. Whenever there was a younger male in the house, he repeated
Hmm.
this pattern of being terrible to them, really, really bad. And my uncle Trevor, who died this year, who I was quite close to, there's a very large gap between them. There's a 7-year age gap between them.
Hmm.
And so my father was utterly loved by my grandmother, the apple
Hmm.
of his eye. He got piano lessons and the best of everything. Unfortunately, my grandfather, Walter, who was a Navy man, had this, which is the reason my father joined the Navy. He wanted to emulate the father he didn't really know, that he'd
Hmm.
built up. Sometimes you hear about children who have been adopted. They think in their heads that maybe their dad was a brain surgeon or a king or a
Yeah,
queen,
yeah,
or
yeah,
that's that kind of wish, kind of wishful thinking, which is absolutely fine. It's not a problem. But um, my grandfather was very much a woman in every port. This kind of idea. He very much was. He was good looking. He was charismatic, and he could get away. I know, good looking. I know. What the hell happened to your genetics, boy? But so he was seeing other women. So my grandmother, in a last ditch attempt to hang on to him, got pregnant with my uncle Trevor.
Hmm.
So my father, who had like his mother's utter love and devotion and time and everything else, all of a sudden she has to deal with a young baby, and she doesn't have the time for him anymore. you know
Hmm.
and my uncle said they did not have, him and his brother, my father, did not have a good relationship growing up, and it was like the young man had come into the household and usurped what my father
Hmm.
had. This led on unconsciously, you know because when my mother was pregnant with myself, both him and his mother wanted a girl.
Hmm.
My grandmother would send knitted things, but with pink ribbons through them, and my mum would pull all the ribbons out and put yellow through, which is a neutral color.
Hmm.
And they all kept saying, think positive, we want a girl, we want a girl. But of course, I was born.
Hmm.
And I think that was a big disappointment to my father, because he was raised with a boy and did not like to occupy spaces with other young
Hmm.
men. And then when my sister was born, it was just like his whole world. His mother adored him even more because he'd given her a granddaughter. My sister got on extremely well with my grandmother. My grandmother just wanted nothing to do with me whatsoever. That's my father's mother, not my mom's mother. You know, so that's where the antecedents of my father's, where his abuse of women came from. I don't know. Maybe he hated my mum for giving him a boy or something. I don't know. But and he maintained this. He retained this kind of relationship. He hopped from relationship to relationship. I've got a funny story. He never spoke to me for 2 years because he was marrying wife number 5, I think it was.
Wow.
And he said, "Oh, just got something to tell you, son. Marvelous news. I'm getting married again." And I said, as a joke, I said, "You do know you can buy wedding cake." Slammed the phone down. Never spoke to me for 2 years. You know, it would sometimes be 2, 3 years between. It's almost like he suddenly remembered, "Oh, I have a son."
All right.
You know, "Oh, I better phone him up." You know, and I always tried to be considerate and tolerant, and you know, but invariably it always just either feathered off or he just stopped calling or stopped contacting me. It was always that kind of stuff, you know. So, but that gave me a greater understanding of why he was the way he was whenever there were young men occupying a space that he wanted predominantly with himself and just women, you know. So and like yourself, I just made certain that anything like that just doesn't happen. You know, you'd always try to be tolerant, compassionate, kind, and a positive male role model, including for other young men that you meet that are in your charge. You know, you're teaching a karate club. You know, you have to present it a certain way, but you don't have to be this old-fashioned bash 'em up karate instructor. No, you can be the kind of more the Mr. Miyagi kind of karate instructor.
Yeah, we kind of are very laid back and nearly horizontal in a karate club. I don't subscribe to the old Japanese militaristic way. You know, the main rule is just sorry, be swearing. Don't be a dick, and you know, don't take a piss, and that will be fine.
Yeah, yeah, and I agree. People often come to train with me. I've often said your class is more like a Chinese class because it has to get a sense of. There always has to be one instructor. That is, you know, that's the key thing. But we try to get everybody involved. So, you know, there's always this thing, like I said, come over here. So when you're teaching this is what you need to do. And listening to what people are saying. Someone's going like, "I find this better to work." And I'm going, "That's fine. That works much better with your frame because you're taller. So I have no problem with you doing that, you know, because you're a taller person or a smaller person."
What are your plans after retirement?
I'm going to start a kids class, which I haven't done up until now. I've only ever taught adult classes. And the kids classes are going to be very different to normal classes because built in within the kids classes are going to be 50 minutes of lessons working around the Budo virtues, but covering all the aspects because I've worked in education. I've worked with young people for decades, you know, all the kind of stuff that is affecting them today. We'll be looking at how we can deal with these. So I'm being really clear that I'm only running small classes and there's no guarantee. You have to have an interview with me before I will take you on. So there's going to be a form on, and the form basically has 2 parts. And it says to the parent, what is it you want from the martial arts class? What are you wanting from your child? What is the results that you're wanting? And then the child has to fill it in as well. So it's going to be using all the tools and, you know, all the skills, the counseling skills, and that the certification for and stuff like this. All that kind of stuff is going to be built into the class. So it's looking to produce a student that is not just a sports student. There will be no sports aspect at all in the class, none whatsoever. You know, everything will be geared towards self-defense. You know, that will be geared towards working through self-defense, but as drills, you know, elbow drills, stuff like this. I have a elbow drill we call our foundation drill because it covers every point that your body will be in when you're delivering different strikes with your arms. You know, and then we have fundamentally very different way of kind of working. So, give you for example. So at the beginning of class, most people go moksu, and there's like a minute or two, and then they go moksu, and they finish. And then when you say to the instructor, you go like, because I do this quite a lot to instructors. I'll say like, what do you mean when you say moksu? They go, that means to meditate. I'm going like, so what have you taught them? What have you taught them? We did a separate class. So once a month, I would be having a separate class where they just come in with their tracksuits on and we discuss things. We don't actually do physical activity. We might do some physical activity, but that's not the focus of it. It's about discussing stuff. You know what I mean? You know, and they say like, do you not have moksu in your classes? And I go, no, I don't. We start with standing. You just stand and use like the Alexander technique. You pretend there's a hook in your head and then lift.
Yeah.
Get them to belly breathe, you know, do like nice, slow, deep breathing, relax. And then what they do is I speak to them. So the beginning of the class, they do concentration. When to concentrate about what you're going to be doing. Think about where you're going to be going. We're going to be starting with some warming up, starting with the exercise. Today, we're going to be working on elbow drills and close range attacks and close range defenses. Okay, so I want you to think hard about this. Give it all you've got. Forget about what's happened for today. Forget about what's going to happen tomorrow. It is only this moment, this hour that's coming up. That's what we start with. Then at the end of the class, we finish with contemplation. How did you think the class went? How do you think you could have improved it better? Why would that have improved it better? You know, what are you going to do next time you come in? How are you going to take away that point that you thought you had lost concentration or something like that? How are you going to pull that in for the next one? Meditation is a very different thing. It's a very different thing. Start with concentration, end with contemplation. You get a better rounded student.
Oh, so
we
do it mokuso, but it is what you just described it. So we're saying, you know, you're in a dojo now, forget about the problems of the day, focus what you're gonna do, how you're gonna perform, give you 100% of your attention to what we do. Then on the end, relax, like you said, think about what went wrong, what went not fine, what you're gonna improve, how you're gonna be better next time. And I always try to encourage, and I included that in my notebook, that always finish on a positive thing. What went great? What you done superb today?
So we have a guy who lectures at the Buddhist center who trains with me. He's actually a professor. He doesn't ever say his name, like, you know, he plays musical instruments. He's one of my senseis, Julian Monda. He's bringing together a proper meditation package because meditation is very different from concentration. So for myself personally, using mokusu at the beginning or mokusu at the beginning or the end or something like that is not a meditative process. You know, meditation is about letting go of things. You know, just you can do it breathing. You know, I mean, they found now that if people are depressed, even going to the shops and buying a loaf of bread and coming back will ease their depression. You move yourself out of the environment and you complete a task. It might be a very minor task, but you have completed a task. A lot of the Buddhist guys say, listen, even if you only take 20 seconds to concentrate on your breath when you're breathing, to do breath meditation when you're doing, even if that will have a positive impact on your brain as well. You know, so we're looking to bring something in, but that will be like a Saturday class. That will be like the one-off class during the month where they come in and they just bring their little notebooks in and they can make notes and ask as many questions as they want and do whatever they want. So I'm looking at doing a radically different kind of club. I have a blackboard in my dojo. I'm lucky. I have my own dojo. I have my own dojo. You've probably seen some pictures of it online. It's very pretty. It's done. It looks like a Japanese dojo, but on the wall I have a blackboard because I'm old-fashioned and I don't like whiteboards. I want a blackboard. So so what happens is during the course of the evening, even when I'm training the adults, I will stop and I will write down. Like, for example, the other week we were looking at Moate. You know, what are you actually doing when you do a Moate? What are the different ways of doing a Moate? How can you get a Moate to work better? So if I shout, behind you, Les, are you likely to turn on the spot? No. You're more likely to kind of step forward and turn, you know, but these need to be built into your training. You can't just expect people to automatically do them. A favorite one of mine is the 45-degree Moate. So say someone says, like behind you, you step out 45 degrees and turn. This places you at an angle to the oncoming attack. So it's just, we have all these different kind of motifs. So you write down what it means, and I then break down very badly drawn diagrams. I'm not an artist, you know, badly stick men like that. Then I look at them, they're all going, okay, I'll try again. I'll try a different stick.
I know the feeling. I've got the same talent.
Yeah. So the blackboard will become part of the teaching environment. So it's not only going to be about just teaching like the kind of martial arts. And I'm lucky because I have my own dojo. I have no costs.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have to try and cram everything in that hour, then pay my £30, £40 to the landlord, whoever it is, or the sports games hall. You know, I can have people in for as long as I want them to. You know, I can, you know, my classes vary badly. You know, if we have a very, very heavy duty, hard session where we're just striking, working with pads, you know, about an hour and 20 minutes is all you kind of need for that, you know. But other times, if we're looking at more technical stuff, it can run for 2.5 hours. And it flies by. It just goes by like this.
Yeah.
You know, we all just work together. So at the moment, it's attempting. So the stuff I've now been using and utilizing and working with, and I figured out where it goes wrong and where it goes right. I'm building into, I'm redoing and building everything, including this into my 5th book, which is going to have like a whole front section about stuff that you can utilize within a dojo, if you wish. If you wish, it might not be everybody. People might not have the confidence to do it. You know, people might not think that's not part of who I am as a person. You know, so find somebody, appoint somebody to do that, because I think it's really important that we give young people, particularly young people, more than just the ability to whack somebody.
Yeah, for sure.
You know, so, and people say like, yeah, but it's implicit. You know, because I remember saying to somebody one time, so why do you do martial arts? And he said, oh, for flexibility. I says, try ballet.
Yeah, or yoga.
Oh, yoga. Yeah. Oh, yoga. Oh, I do it for my mental thing. Try chess. I'm saying, why are you doing martial arts? You have to, like a child, you have to strip through all these layers of bull, you know, and get to what the core it is that we're doing. What is the core that we want to be doing as people? You know, what is the core of it? For me, it's like it's a coin with two sides. I'm trying to improve people physically with the ability that if it is required, they can defend themselves, you know, and that might be sen, no sen. It might be an attack first. Do you know what I mean? Depending on if it's multiple attacks, you know, it might not just be go no sen, you know. And then the other side of it, can I help them and equip them with a set of precepts, a set of behaviors, a set of things which will improve their life? You know, it's like I say in the book, who doesn't want your child to be courageous, respectful, loyal, honorable, honest, benevolent, and have rectitude in their life? Who doesn't want that for their child? Only an idiot would say they don't want that for their child. Everybody wants that. Those 7 simple things you can bring in, and there's complete knockoffs. Each one of these has spin-offs that you can build out like a spider diagram. You know the spider diagrams? Yeah. Each one you can take and build out and build out and build out and build out. And many times the Olympic ring, they come over each other, you know? And so for me, it was trying to cut back and cut back. And what can I do that might help people that I've used in my work, that I've used, genuinely worked hands-on with this stuff? It's not like it's untested. What can I do that will make people's lives a bit better? What have I used on myself that makes my life better? So I use these things in my own life.
So here's the question now. Because you work with people with difficulties, young people, I'm kind of doing it based on my own experience. I'm not educated in that area. I done few courses and stuff like that. But there's many more people who are reaching out to me who would like to improve their skills, knowledge, working with younger adults, children with troubles. What would you recommend as a literature that they can educate themselves and not necessarily break a bank of going to university and doing degree? Except your book, obviously, because
because actually it sounds silly, but you know, this within the book, let me just, it sounds silly, but there is very little out there. The reason I wrote this, and I took a lot of care and attention writing this book, this wasn't like an overnight book. But the things that we have, I speak about Kokuru and the virtues, and then we have attachment theory, which is really important to know about, and the Budo child. The other, which means the person that they're looking at and reflecting behaviors back on, you know, the other and the
Mm-hmm.
Budo child's social self, the social self, how they come about, you know, moral development. How does your child develop morals? How do they, and
Mm-hmm.
it changes with their year as they age, it changes, you know, when they work into peer groups and stuff like this. And just to be aware of it means you can, you know, positive reinforcement, critical thinking through the Budo lens, and then the 4 circles of Budo importance conclusion. And at the end of it, there's this big thing which tells you what kind of physiological and mental roughly that they should be. And I actually say, don't worry if they don't hit all of them. I wrote this as a way of, it was cathartic for me getting it down. You know, I mean, I have like a master's in sociology. I'm one of the first people ever, apparently, and it wasn't done the way it was, to have academic work published on the UFC.
Yeah, I've read that in
Yeah, but it didn't start off with that. Basically, somebody, my tutor came to me and says, "Oh, you know about the UFC and that?" And I was like going, "Yeah." I says, "Why?" And he says, "Oh, there's a guy called Professor Dunning at the University of Leicester, and he's had this thing coming through saying that UFC is like terrible and people. There's a thing called the civilizing process. Don't worry too much about that, and it contradicts his civilizing process." And I went, "No, it doesn't." I says, "In fact, it reinforces it." I says, "Because when it started off, it was NHB." Which was no holds barred. There are only 2 rules: no eye gouging, no biting. And this was in 1998. I said they now have rules that says 2 of them of importance to what you're saying: no spitting and no ungentlemanly behavior. Right? I'm saying, so how can there's been this massive civilizing influence on it compared to how it was? I'm saying so. And he says, "Could you write a paper on it?" And I was like, "No, I'm in the middle of my dissertation." And he goes, "Just write 10,000 words. Just give me something and then I'll send it away." So I wrote the answer. I sent it away, forgot about it. It was just me trying to help somebody else in another university. And that was it. I forgot about it. And then somebody appeared to me and said, "You've been published." And I was like going, "No, it's not me." I says, "There must be somebody else out there with the same last name as me and maybe doing geophysics or something." I says, "But it's not me." He goes, "No, you've been published." And I looked at it and I was like, pfft. I said, and almost every single person gets it wrong. People say BA dissertation, unpublished on this, and it wasn't. It simply was like if you said to me, "Mark, do us a favor, could you write something about like this, right? Could you write something like this?" So I write it to you, and you go like, "Oh, this is pretty good," and you send it in, and then some child psychology magazine publishes it. It wasn't to be published; it was for you. You know what I mean? It just so happens that the professor went, "Oh, this is really good. I'll publish it." And it's really quite interesting when you're and when I read it now, I go, "Ooh, that's nasty." It's so old now. I go, "Oh, no, look at that. It's awful. Look at that sentence structure." But what's really interesting is because you're the first, you often tend to get mentioned in everything, like in PhD dissertations and stuff like that. They go, and very often they just write my name in, as House said, and that's it. That's the last thing I get to hear of it in 1998. So yeah. So, but again, randomly. So how could I take that kind of stuff and stuff that I find has worked through working with young people? So at the moment, I actually work with musically gifted young people. But like I said, I'm retiring at the end of August, and I'm really wanting to concentrate on developing. I want to develop something that if you say to me, "I kind of like what you're doing," I can say, "Here's the lesson plan. Here's the material you can use. You know, here's the material from 5 to 8s. Here's the material from 8 to 10s. Here's the material from 10 to 13s. Here's the material from boom, boom, boom." That's my final goal, is to have this written out. And, you know, and also what to do if you're dealing with young people that are struggling, if you know, because they have things nowadays we didn't have, you know. I read recently about one of the problems that young people now face is they have overprotective parenting and underprotective internet access. You know, so the overprotective parenting. When you was a kid, did you walk to school?
Yep.
You ever get driven?
No, we didn't have a car because my dad was involved in a crash and his driving license was taken away. But I was in a big city, so we had the buses everywhere.
Yeah, but I mean, like myself, I never ever got driven to school. We walked to school. We went out on our bikes, we played. You know, nowadays you see this kind of tension built in with parents, you know, if their child doesn't know where they are, or, you know, the forms you now have to fill in to take your child down to the beach. If I was doing something with my unit and I just, your child is with me and I have to take it, you know, the form I have to fill in, I have to fill in a form for the minibus, right? Risk assessment for the minibus. Okay, including the insurance. What happens if it breaks down? What happens if this happens? What's happening? Then I have to do a risk assessment for the number of staff I'm taking. So how many kids are you taking? So normally it's about 15 to 1, 10 to 15 to 1. You know, how many kids are you taking? Oh, they're going to be near water. Yeah, but it's down a little beach. You know, how many staff have got there can swim? You know, what do you do if a couple of children are, and this risk assessment, which normally I would phone you up and just say, you know, right, there's a file of us all going down to the beach for a little paddle and get some ice cream. You go, oh, thanks for letting us know, you know, and then that will be it. Now it's like you have to have all the, and now they have to be done digitally and stored on a main database. You know, it's so changed. This fear of what might happen is and this kind of leaks out into parents. You know, if all this is happening here, it leaks outwards, you know.
And that builds an anxiety in children. I was reading the book about United States, that they've got the, you know, you're meant to have the healthiest generation, and they've got a jump of an anxiety and mental health problems with children by 4,000%, because that expectation of trouble causing constant anxiety and fear,
Yeah,
instead of
and also,
instead of just dealing with what happens now, they
yeah,
of thinking what's gonna happen in 5 years later,
yeah,
and all the
yeah.
time being stressed.
And it doesn't help with mainstream media banging things in like climate change, you know, and we're
Mm,
all going to be dead in 5 years. All the water's going to go, and this is going to happen, you know. And young people, and then on top of that, you have the whole social media problem. You
mhm,
know, somebody posts something and doesn't get any likes, or what people do is they're cruel. They're absolutely
mm,
cruel online, because you can be anonymously. So if we were at school together and I was cruel to you, right, you can punch me in the face.
yeah.
Well, that will limit how cruel I'm going to be to you in the future, right? Or even if you don't, you miss with it and I have to back away quickly. I'm going to limit what I say to you in future when we're face to
Mm,
face. But if I'm never ever going to meet you or anything like that, then I can be as cruel and as mean as I want. And
mm,
children navigate that way. They tend to navigate towards, you know. So you've heard of the we I thing. Have you heard of this?
no.
The we I. Okay, so let's just take a simple example of Rangers and Celtic, which
Mhm,
you probably know up here is like a major thing. You know, they fight and they really hate each other and all the rest of it,
mhm,
right? So I support one of the football teams. Let's just say I support Rangers. So I mentioned Celtic earlier. So let's just say I support
mm,
Rangers. So what I do with Rangers is I imbued in Rangers the whole fraternity, everything that's associated with it, all the positive aspects of humanity, right? Which must, by de facto, filter down to me
mhm,
because I'm part of this, right? You're a Celtic supporter, and I imbued on you all the worst bits of humanity, right? Which must filter down to you.
mhm,
And they have now found that when you berate people and have a go at people, you know, there's a thing called Kepler's dominance eminence theory. It's well worth having a look at. So basically, he says that you will feel good by dominating or emulating. So if
mhm,
I dominate you, even verbally, I make you turn away like this, you know, I will get a surge of endorphins and serotonin dumped in my head. I feel great, you know. On the eminence, me and you are training hard for our knee dans or our sand dans or whatever else, and we work really hard and we get them. We get that same thing because we're working as a
mm,
team. So we get this social cohesion, which gives us a dump, you know, of feeling good factors. And we also have the individual where I can have a go at you and the domination of you kind of idea. And all these things mishmash in a weird, crazy thing online where I will come on with the group and have a go at you. For example, the stuff you see about John Blooming. People who've never known him, never trained with him,
yeah,
never trained with Oyama, weren't around, maybe started in the 90s. You know, 90. So let's just say they started Kyokushin in 96,
yeah.
30 years after John Blooming was given his sixth dan by Masatatsu Oyama. then they start to slag him off at some point down the evening. So it's for myself, I think one of the things that is truly missing from education, and I think is really important for parents to then teach, is critical thinking. Right? I remember speaking to somebody once. He will remain nameless, but he's somebody I've known for a while, and he's like a counselor, and he was something to do with education at that time. And I said to him, "Why aren't you pushing to have critical thinking as part of education?" And he says, "Because we'd all be voted out." When we became adults. And he said it jocularly, but there was an element of truth in it. I mean, and when people critically think, they start to challenge presumptions. You want more than me just saying it. There's like, how many pages are there? There's like, hang on a minute, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 pages of references in the back of my book. 7 pages of stuff written in, because I'm just not saying this is me saying this. This is where it's coming from. So you can critically evaluate it yourself. You can go away and read this stuff and critically evaluate it and go, no, I'm not getting the same feeling. And that's right. That's fine. And then when we come together, we can communicate and we can broaden horizons together by good communication, by tolerant communication, considerate communication. This is how we move forward as a species. It's not the opposite way. And what's happening now with our young people, as we're seeing like a kind of transition here, because I know 3 and 4 year olds have got their own phones. They have smartphones. They can go online. I mean, okay, they use different things than we do, but they're already starting to become part of this digital generation. I think that's appalling. Research says you shouldn't really give them a smartphone until they're 14.
Yeah, that's what we've got a conversation now with Max, and that's what I say. He's very analytic. So he came to us and said, "Oh, my friend's got a phone. I want a phone with internet." And I said, "Just no." So he just keep banging about it, This I said, okay, listen, let's sit down. Studies show that till up to 14, 16-year-old, your brain's gonna be just damaged, and you're gonna have a mental health problems. People who went through that, they're 18 now. They said they regret being introduced to internet that early. There's lots of threats. You've got, not every person is nice person. People try to scam you, abuse you, and so on. Doesn't ask for a phone at all now.
And that is a wonderful way to involve him as part of the process, and make him available for it. I've got a thing pop up here. Oh, it's still recording.
Yeah,
It's just suddenly popped up with something with leave on it. I was like, I never touched it. So for myself, I've tried to make the book. I'm not trying to sell my book because it's pennies. It's under, I think it's at £10 or something, right?
Yeah.
The amount of work that's gone in this, and I've stripped it back and I've given it to lay people. I've said, can you understand this? I've not gone for academic speech. There's some stuff you can't get away with. You have to understand. So for certain ones of like the attachment issues, so on attachment theory, I've written about the stages of attachment and stuff like this to try and make it a little bit easier. I've done things like secure attachment, so avoidance attachment, flight strategy, ambivalent or resistant attachment, fight strategy, and then disorganized attachment, freeze strategy. So I've tried to pull in, that's a bit broad strokes, I do realize that, but I've tried to put in things that as a martial artist, people go, oh, fight, flight, freeze. I understand these now. And I can look, and within every section, like within the stages of attachments, I actually using it, right? So, okay, I'm just reading this out. Some typical avoidant attachment presentations: detachment in relationships, excessive indulgence, disappearing into a bubble, eating disorders, self-harm, depression. Then underneath that, I say, how you can help. I just don't tell you what to do. I'm just, if you're interacting with a child showing avoidant attachments, perhaps in your dojo, be consistently empathic towards them. Ask their opinion. Make certain you maintain eye contact and listen to what they're saying. Include them in groups by specifically noting them by name and getting them to be in charge of a group, thus reducing their independence. Make a point of praising their efforts. Do not punish them. Instead, gently talk to them about why a certain action or behavior is wrong. These children want to be part of a group. If you have a trustworthy members within your group, get them to act with them. Utilize through conversations and stories the virtues of Budo, so they can use it as a self-diagnosis tool. So it's very
Brilliant.
broad strokes, but each one I give you a little idea of how you can help. And pretty much it's always the same thing. Be compassionate. Be compassionate.
Like I said, I only started reading the book, but I'm finding a lot of value in first 15 pages. And now you've been citing stuff. I'm looking forward to reading it all. And guys, if you didn't read it yet, there will be link in the description to grab it. It's on Amazon, right?
It's on Amazon, yeah. Same as
Yeah,
yours, yeah.
and I'm highly recommending it, and I'm looking forward for your next one to come out, and make sure you let me know.
Of course I
And
will.
I don't have it with me, but we committed a book together nearly. Well, I've committed a little bit chapter to your excellent book,
I think
um,
uh,
with lot of famous people,
there are
much
very
more.
people in there who are very kind, including yourself. You're very kind to put a story in
Yeah,
there for me. You're very kind.
yeah, I was
You
kind
know,
of read through that book, and I think, what am I doing here? You've got such a noble people and high-ranking people,
and
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 what am I
there's your
milli
there's your dad right there. There's your dad right behind you, right there.
Yeah, yeah.
Because I do the same thing. I have this imposter syndrome sometimes.
Mm,
I get
yeah.
imposter syndrome because I got told I was unworthy, I was useless, I was stupid, I was, in between hits, I don't
Mm,
even know why you're my son, all that kind of stuff. So, like you, I recognize examples of it. When you said that, I don't know why I'm in
uh,
there. I
um,
consider your story as worthy as anybody's.
Thank you.
But I don't. Sorry, I picked on you a little bit there. And there's
Oh,
your
that's
dad
okay.
because I
Yeah,
recognize
yeah.
it in myself.
That's very true, and it took me a long time, and like now when I get kind of catch off guard, it comes back. But I working hard on it that no, I am valuable, and it is worthy. I should be there. I should done that. But it's a process, like you said, right?
Yeah.
I'm only 40, so I'm only beginning the process. So
Yeah, but think how good you're going to be when you're 50. You've got
yeah,
26 years to catch up on me.
exactly.
So I have 26 years more experience. I mean, I've been doing martial arts 10 years longer than you've been alive.
I know, I know.
That's just awful.
Hanshi, thank you very much for your time, and I'm sure I'm gonna have you again if that's possible,
Oh,
because
of
I'm
course
sure
it
I'm
is.
gonna have a lot of questions after reading the book, and I would like to have a deep dive into using the Budo principles in bringing up children, because I've got two little ones on my own, and any help I can get with it, it's most appreciated.
Well, like I said, I mean, there are some things where, and again, my father comes out on this. I picked this up because I knew we were going to talk about it. I picked it up and I started flicking through it. And my wife says, my wife's a social worker. She works with young people as well. And she said, now will you believe me? It's a good book. Because I read something and went, I forgot I wrote that. That's actually pretty good. She said, you always do this. She says, you write a book and then you never pick it up. You never look at it because you think it's
Mm,
going to be rubbish. And I said,
yeah.
I do. And that's my father. That's my father behind me. Why would anyone read your book? It's rubbish. It's not, and
Mm,
I really, with this book, I'm very proud of this book. I'm proud of all my books, obviously,
mhm,
proud of the fact that people were prepared to give me time and effort to write books. And I did one on looking at Budo virtues in religions,
mhm,
warrior principles and stuff like this, But out of all the books I've done, I think for myself, the child development and other people who have child care experience might look at this and go like, no, I wouldn't go that way. I would go this way. I wouldn't go that way. I would go this way. And that is perfectly fine. All I can do is work with what I found works well for me as a karate instructor. And it's very
yeah.
easy. And I can look sometimes at kids and just go like, okay, what's going on? Kind of here, like you automatically do it. You don't look for consistency in your children, as in not your children, but the children who train
Mm,
with you. You look for those points when they're not consistent. Okay, so for example, you have a child and she always turns up immaculate in a gi, well nourished, and her hair's always fine, all the rest of it. And then you start to notice she's turning up, she's not engaging so much, her hair hasn't been, well, her gi's not been ironed, and you instantly go, something is off here. That something's off. So you can play a part by observing the inconsistencies, if that makes any kind of sense. You need it's two sides of a coin again. You need consistencies so you can recognize the inconsistencies. And then as a karate instructor, you can maybe then approach parents, is everything okay with this child? And they go like, yeah, fine. Just saying, well, no, not within the club anymore.
Yeah.
Anyway, we could talk for hours.
Yeah. I need to go and teach.
Yes, okay, But thank you so much. This is a really valuable tool for people. So thank you so much for, inviting me on it. I really do appreciate it.
Thank you for your time. And like I said, I'm gonna grab you again. We need to give me a time to bloody camera. Give me a time to this way. Give me a time to finish it, process it, and I come up with questions, and I'll be more than happy to talk about it and learn more.
Us.
Thank you for your time. Us.
Okay, thank you. Us.